Today's tech news moves fast, but understanding it shouldn't be hard. That's why Snarful Solutions Group brings you Connecting the Dots, where we break down what's happening in tech and why it matters to you. Now, let's dive in with your hosts.
Okay, it's Monday, April 14th, 2025. Time for our check-in. Weather-wise, we've got a storm system strengthening up over the upper Great Lakes.
Right.
Expect moderate, maybe heavy snow in Michigan's upper peninsula through Tuesday morning.
And further south.
Further south, yeah, Ohio Valley, parts of the Appalachians, Mid-Atlantic. You could see some strong, potentially severe thunderstorms today, so keep an eye on that.
Got it. And markets.
Markets had a pretty good day. The Dow Jones finished up 1.56%. That's 402.1.71.
S jump.
Yeah, and the S&P 500 climbed 1.81% to 5,363.36.
Okay.
So today here on Snarful's Cutting the Dots, we're going to dig into three pretty significant tech news stories that just broke.
And the idea is to connect them back, right? See how they might actually, ripple out and affect everyday life, the tech we use.
Exactly, how it all fits together in that broader landscape.
Absolutely. It's amazing how these things, seemingly separate tech or trade issues, really weave together these complex webs. So where should we start? Maybe that news out of China could touch a whole lot of different industries.
Yeah, let's unpack that first one. So reports are that China has suspended exports of 7 specific rare earth minerals.
Right. And related materials.
And these things, most people don't think about them daily, but they are absolutely vital, aren't they, for just a huge range of tech.
They really are. We're talking, let me see the list. Dysprosium, gadolinium, scandium, terbium, samarium, yttrium, and lutetium.
Not exactly household names.
Definitely not. But, they're essential. They're in catalysts that cut car emissions used in refining petroleum.
Okay.
They're in the super strong magnets for wind turbines, huge for green energy.
Right.
And yeah, defense tech uses them too. Plus phosphors, the things that make our screens light up.
And the timing on this suspension, it seems pretty specific. Shipments halted April 4th.
Yeah.
Which was right after the U.S. announced some new tariffs on Chinese goods.
Exactly. So it's widely seen as retaliation, a direct response.
And it really highlights China's position in this market, doesn't it? Their control.
Oh, absolutely. China isn't just like a big player. They pretty much dominate rare earths, around 90% of global production.
90%. Wow.
Yeah. So that gives them, enormous leverage in trade talks or disputes.
So what does this suspension actually mean? Exporters need licenses now.
That's the mechanism. They need licenses from the Ministry of Commerce, and based on what we're hearing, it's not just a rubber stamp.
No.
No. The process could take like 6 to 7 weeks, maybe even longer, and it's apparently quite opaque, not very clear how decisions are made.
Right. So if you're a company, a manufacturer needing these minerals, you could be looking at serious
big time delays. And we're already seeing reports.
Yeah.
Some Chinese sellers are declaring force majeure.
The act of God clause, basically.
Pretty much. Saying, unforeseen circumstances can't fulfill the contract. Plus, it sounds like any cargo that was already at the port but hadn't cleared customs.
It's stuck.
Seems like it. Barred from leaving.
So that creates immediate problems. Bottlenecks, uncertainty.
For sure. And if this freeze, the suspension, lasts more than, say, 2 months, companies could burn through their stockpiles.
And the reports also suggested U.S. companies might have an even tougher time getting these licenses because of the trade tensions.
That's the speculation, yeah. Given the ongoing trade friction, it seems plausible U.S. clients might face extra hurdles.
Okay, so let's connect this back. Everyday life. You mentioned magnets. How critical are these for, say, electric vehicles?
Hugely critical. That's where it gets really interesting for consumers. Elements like neodymium, dysprosium, terbium, they're essential for the high-strength magnets in EV motors.
Right, the things that actually make the car go.
Exactly. So a disruption here, it could seriously throw a wrench into the whole EV growth trajectory.
And it's not just digging the stuff out of the ground, is it? China's big in the processing, too.
Oh, massively. They refine something like 89% of the world's neodymium and praseodymium.
Wow.
Those are the key metals for the really good EV magnets. So even if a company sources the raw earth from somewhere else, like, say, Estonia or Japan, there's a very good chance the refined materials, the usable stuff, still came from or through China.
So this isn't just a minor supply blip. This could really ripple through global industries.
Yeah.
Especially automotive, which people follow closely.
Definitely. It could absolutely impact the cost, maybe the availability of EVs down the road.
But, okay, there's maybe a flip side. One of the articles suggested this kind of move might finally force buyers, overseas companies, to really diversify, to get serious about finding other sources.
That's the long-term potential consequence, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a huge undertaking, though. Building new, resilient, rare earth supply chains, it's complex, it's expensive.
Takes time.
A lot of time. Needs massive investment in mining, processing, refining elsewhere. But yeah, these kinds of shocks can be a powerful motivator, a wake-up call, really.
It really highlights a vulnerability, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Especially with the big push towards green energy.
It forces a hard look at where everything comes from, especially as we try to decarbonize.
And speaking of finding other sources, there was that fascinating bit about U.S. coal ash research from UT Austin.
Yeah, that caught my eye, too. They estimate potentially 11 million tons of rare earth elements locked up in coal ash here in the U.S.
Which is huge, right? Like 8 times the known reserves.
Exactly. And the interesting part, the potential advantage, is that the burning process in power plants has already kind of done some of the initial separation work.
Oh. Right.
So it might take less energy, be less costly to refine them from ash compared to digging them out of traditional mines.
But still, even with that potential, becoming truly independent, that's a long road.
Oh, absolutely. Years, probably decades. The scale of investment, the infrastructure needed, it's enormous.
There was also mention of some U.S. policy efforts, a bipartisan bill, the RARE Act.
Right, the Reclaiming American Rare Earths Act, aimed at providing incentives, financial carrots for domestic production.
And a specific site in Colorado trying to be the first non-China refinery.
Yes, that's another piece. Plus, the example of Japan was mentioned. After they had a similar dispute with China, they really focused on building alternative supply chains.
So it can be done.
It can be done, but it takes sustained effort, strategic thinking, and long-term investment. It's not a quick fix.
So for everyone listening, just think about the electronics you use. That phone in your hand, your computer, the EVs maybe you're thinking about buying, even defense technology. If this rare earth situation drags on or gets worse, we could see impacts, availability, maybe price increases.
Definitely. And it raises that bigger question for us at Snarful and for everyone, really. How do we build more secure, more resilient supply chains for these critical materials, especially in such a complicated global picture?
Yeah, good question. Okay, let's shift gears. Second big story. This one sounds like it could hit the tech sector pretty broadly, too. Potential U.S. national security probe into semiconductor imports.
That's the report, yeah. Indications are President Trump might direct the Commerce Department to launch a Section 232 investigation into semiconductor imports.
Section 232 again.
Yep. And that, as we know, could lead to new tariffs on these chips, which are just fundamental to everything electronic.
We just touched on 232. Remind us again the core idea.
So Section 232, it's part of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962. It basically gives the president power to put tariffs or other limits on imports if those imports are found to threaten U.S. national security.
Okay. And wasn't the original point of that 1962 act actually about lowering tariffs?
Ironically, yes. Back during the Cold War, the goal was boosting competitiveness by reducing trade barriers. But Section 232 provides this specific mechanism for protection based on national security.
And we've definitely seen this administration use it. Recently, the tariffs announced on imported cars, SUVs, light trucks.
Exactly, citing national security. The argument being that a decline in domestic manufacturing weakens the country.
Right. And going back further, the Trump administration used 232 for steel and aluminum tariffs, didn't they?
They did. Those are still in effect. The logic was similar. Relying too much on imports hurt the domestic industry, which they framed as a national security risk. And then later, they added tariffs on derivative products, things made from that steel and aluminum.
One of the articles pointed out that courts tend to give presidents a lot of leeway with Section 232.
That's a key factor, yeah. Historically, the courts haven't really stepped in much. There isn't a super clear legal definition of national security for them to challenge these decisions easily.
So if chip tariffs were proposed, challenging them legally might be tough.
It could be an uphill battle. It's worth remembering, too, that Commerce did an investigation into auto imports back in 2019.
Right.
They concluded autos did pose a security risk then, but tariffs weren't imposed at that time. Now the administration is pointing back to that report to justify the new auto tariffs.
And it seems like this isn't just about cores and chips. There was mention of lumber, too.
Yeah, one source noted Commerce is looking for comments on a Section 232 probe into lumber imports, following an executive order back in March.
So it feels like this national security justification for trade actions is being applied more broadly now.
It does seem that way. It signals maybe a wider shift in using national security as a primary lens for trade policy across different sectors. The lumber investigation shows the process is moving forward methodically in other areas too.
Okay, so let's bring it back again. If tariffs actually happen on imported chips, how does that hit the average person? You, me, our listeners.
Well, think about it. Semiconductors, chips.
Yeah.
They're the brains, the core components in almost everything electronic.
Computers, phones.
Gaming consoles, TVs, appliances, cars, you name it. If you put tariffs on the imported chips, it almost certainly raises the cost to make those products.
And those costs usually get passed on, right?
Almost always, yeah.
Yeah.
So consumers could end up paying higher prices for a whole range of electronics.
What about the U.S. tech companies themselves? Does this help or hurt their innovation, their competitiveness?
That's the really complex question. For us at Snarful, for the whole tech world, the chip industry is incredibly globalized.
Right.
U.S. companies design chips, but often rely on manufacturing and assembly overseas. It's this intricate global supply chain.
So tariffs could mess that up.
Could disrupt it significantly, yeah.
Wait.
Make it more expensive for U.S. firms to get the components they need, which could potentially slow down innovation or make it harder for them to compete price-wise against companies in other countries.
So even if the goal is boosting domestic production for security, there might be, like, unintended side effects for competitiveness.
Exactly. It's a balancing act. Trying to achieve security goals without inadvertently harming the very industry you might be trying to protect or strengthen in the long run. It's tricky.
Definitely a lot of moving parts there. Okay, third story. Let's pivot to Intel. They just announced they're selling a majority stake in Altera, their programmable chip unit.
Yes, big news in the semiconductor space. Intel agreed to sell a 51% stake in Altera to a private equity firm, Silver Lake.
And the valuation was pretty high.
Yeah, $8.75 billion. Intel keeps the other 49%.
And it sounds like Altera gets more freedom now. Operationally independent, they called it?
That's the term they used, yes.
Yeah.
And there's a new CEO coming in. Rahib Hussain takes over from Sandra Rivera on May 5th.
And Intel's CEO, Lip-Bu Tan, framed this as part of a bigger strategy.
Right. He said it helps focus the company, cut expenses, and strengthen their balance sheet. Makes sense from a corporate strategy perspective.
Okay, for folks listening who aren't deep in the chip world,
Yeah.
what exactly does Altera do? What are these programmable chips?
Good question. So Altera, they've been around since 1983, actually. They specialize in something called FPGAs, Field Programmable Gate Arrays.
Okay. What does that mean?
So unlike a normal chip where the function is fixed when it's made, an FPGA is kind of like a blank slate. Engineers can program and even reprogram its function after it's been manufactured, even when it's already in a device out in the field.
So they're flexible.
Incredibly flexible, which makes them really valuable for things where standards change or where you need specialized processing, like in communications gear, robotics.
And AI too, I bet.
Increasingly, yes. AI is a big driver. Algorithms evolve so fast, FPGAs let you adapt the hardware.
Intel bought Altera back in 2015, right? For a lot of money.
Yeah, $16.7 billion. It became their Programmable Solutions Group, or PSG. So selling off a majority stake now is definitely a significant shift from that strategy.
Didn't they talk about spinning off PSG before, like an IPO?
They did. Back in 2023, they announced plans to spin it off as a separate company, maybe IPO within 3 years, but with Intel keeping majority control.
So the Silver Lake deal, it's kind of along those lines, but different. Majority stake goes out.
Seems like it, yeah. A step towards that independence, maybe just accelerated or taking a slightly different path with private equity involved first.
And this FPGA market, it's growing fast.
Oh, yeah. Reports suggest it could more than double by 2029. Altera itself did, what, $1.54 billion in revenue last fiscal year?
What's pushing that growth so much?
A lot of it is that demand for adaptable computing. AI and machine learning are huge drivers, needing flexible hardware. Also, 5G communications, data centers, industrial automation, lots of areas need that programmability.
It's interesting, though. I remember reading last year, Altera's CEO then, Sandra Rivera, specifically denied they were selling outright. She stressed the IPO plan for 2026, but said selling a stake might be part of it.
Right. So this announcement, while maybe surprising in its structure with Silver Lake taking majority, Does kind of fit that earlier narrative of seeking partners or external investment on the path to independence.
And they're bringing back the Altera brand names. It had been folded into Intel PSG.
Yeah, that signals a clear identity again. And it's notable with AMD having bought Xilinx, Altera is now basically the only big independent company left focused purely on FPGAs.
We also saw the COO is retiring, Shannon Poulin.
Right. Often happens with these big shifts. Leadership changes, restructuring, pretty standard as they set up the new independent operation.
Okay, so connecting the dots again. Most people aren't buying FPGA chips directly. But how might this Altera deal, the sale, the potential IPO, how might that affect us?
Well, you're right. You don't buy them at the store, but
Yeah.
FPGAs are like the hidden infrastructure. They're critical in the cell towers connecting your phone, in the routers managing internet traffic, in the servers running cloud services,
Yeah.
and, as we said, increasingly in AI development, specialized computing. So if Altera becomes more focused, maybe better funded through Silver Lake and a future IPO,
Yeah.
that could potentially speed up innovation in FPGA technology. Better, faster, more efficient chips, which could translate downstream into, say, faster internet speeds, more reliable phone networks, more capable AI systems impacting everything from medicine to maybe self-driving cars eventually.
So even though it's a kind of corporate maneuvering story, it could actually influence the underlying tech we all rely on.
Exactly. It's a good example of how these big industry shifts, even if they seem abstract, can eventually filter down and shape the technology capabilities available to all of us.
Okay, so let's just quickly wrap up the main threads we pulled today.
Sounds good.
First, China's rare earth export controls. Huge potential impact on lots of industries, forcing a rethink of global supply chains.
Right. Then the possible U.S. national security probe into chip imports. That could mean higher costs for electronics, and it raises questions about U.S. tech competitiveness.
And finally, Intel selling that majority stake in Altera, a big shift in the programmable chip market that could affect the development of fundamental technologies behind the internet, AI, and more.
And putting them all together, it really paints a picture of just how interconnected everything is now. Geopolitics, national security, corporate strategy, they're all deeply tangled up in the future of tech.
It definitely makes you think about the long game, right? What are the strategic ripple effects for trade, for innovation, for security down the line?
Absolutely. And how do companies, how do consumers, how do we all adapt to this constantly shifting landscape?
These are definitely the big questions to keep mulling over as these stories develop.
Indeed. The decisions being made now by governments and companies will really shape the tech world for years to come.
We are here to help here at Snarful, so reach out on our website if you have any more questions.
That's a wrap on today's top stories. Remember, tech doesn't have to be complicated, and we're here to help connect the dots. If you've got questions or want to learn more, visit us at snarful.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.